What do I know, right? In the spring of my daughter Maddie's junior year, she was lying on the couch watching a movie for the 13th time, and I was trying to talk to her about the summer coming up because I knew the summer after junior year was really important for what, how's it look on your application. So I said, Maddie, what are you thinking about for this summer? Well, what about language camp? You love French. Well, what about community service? What about community service in France? And she looked at me and she goes, Mom, I'm a junior in high school. I just want to have fun. Can't I just have fun? And she's right. I mean, high school is an experience unto itself. It's not a precursor to college. But it is also, as you approach this last 15 months and 16 months of your high school career, it's important to start looking forward. And the real trick is to try to balance both of those things out. First, I'm going to describe to you the current college admissions landscape and try to make some sense of it, because the media loves to blow it out of proportion. And then I'm going to give you students some suggestions about looking widely and looking wisely at colleges. And then finally, I'm going to talk about how the students, this is your process to control, but to suggest some ways in which parents can be helpful. And I think of the college admissions process as really a play in 3 acts, and this is the first act. You're getting introduced to all the players here, right? To the college counseling staff, to the people who read the applications. The second act is when you really go around and start to visit and apply different places. And the third act is when you decide. You have some key players here. Let's keep in mind that the student is really the lead role, and that the parents and counselors are really supporting actors in this whole process. So the competitive nature of colleges right now, it's front and center. Parents, throw away all the magazines, newspapers, and anytime there's an article or a broadcast on the radio, turn it off about college admissions, because it is an inflated sense of panic out there that nobody thinks they'll get into their first choice colleges. So students, here's your first question for colleges. What percentage of colleges do you think of students get into their first choice college? Any guesses, students? Yes.
I would say 85%.
An optimist. Yes.
20%?
20%. It's actually in between. It's about 70% of students get into the. So don't you feel better already? Yeah. But what's happened is that it's become much more competitive, and I'm going to outline some of the reasons. Number one reason is the ease of the online application, the common application, which you're going to fill out in the course of this year. It's so much easier to just push a button and apply to a college. Many colleges have removed the barriers to applying to those colleges, such as an application fee. Those have oftentimes been removed. So colleges want more applications because this is a numbers game. The more selective they are, the more prestige, on and on. So it's a kind of vicious cycle that's going on. And then the sheer demographics. The baby boomers, my generation, you parents out there, we had a lot of kids. So they talk about this generation being the echo boom, and in fact, the demographics are such that somewhere between 2008 and 2012 is the largest graduating class in American history. So there are 800,000 more kids going to college than there were 25 years ago. There are not 800,000 more seats in colleges. So just the sheer demographic bubble has made it more competitive. And the third reason is really the pursuit of prestige. We have, when my generation was going to school, college 30 years ago, there wasn't this focus on getting into the quote-unquote best college you could. There were lots of best colleges that were perceived, but as competition in this country has gone up, the pursuit of prestige has really become the name of the game. But chasing prestige is really a losing battle, and this is one of the messages I want to leave you with today. I'm going to give you an overview of the sheer numbers of what's going on here. There are approximately for purposes of this exercise, let's take the top 25 colleges and universities in this country as described by U.S. News & World Report, but I'll talk about that number later. That's not really the best way to rate colleges, but just for the purposes of this exercise. So I actually totaled this up. There are about 42,000 spots at the top 25 colleges and universities in this country. Okay. okay? So 42 in the top 25 universities and 12,000 in the freshman class of the top 25 liberal arts colleges, for a total of 54,000 spots, okay? There are about 3 million students going to college. Okay, so you can see that's your chances of getting into one of those top slots. Now we know your students are way above average here, right? Yes, and so the numbers won't play out that way, but it's just hyper competitive at the top of the food chain. So it's very humbling when you look at those numbers of how many spots there really are. So now that I've scared you a little bit, I want to remind you of that number again. 70% of you get into your first choice college. And how does that happen? Because you do a good job of looking at lots of different options, just not at the name brand colleges. So how many of you have an iPhone in your pocket? Quite a few of you. Do you know, how many of you have heard of Reed College? Okay. Reed College educated Stephen Jobs, who created the iPhone. It's a little known college in Portland, Oregon, a great little place. How many of you have ever heard of Ripon College in Wisconsin? One person. Are you from Wisconsin?
I'm from Wisconsin.
Thank you. Vikings fans? I like them. So anyways, a little tiny college in Wisconsin, which educated a couple years ago a Rhodes Scholar. It's the alma mater of Harrison Ford and a great jazz musician named Al Jarreau. All went to this tiny little school in Wisconsin. So don't rule out regional colleges that you've never heard of before. And you're right, these representatives will come to Garrison Forest and you'll get to meet the people who represent the institutions. And it might not be a school you've ever heard of, but it might have the criteria of the kind of college that would serve you well. So just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean you shouldn't check it out. What's special about these small colleges is they replicate the learning experience that you've had here. Clearly, I'm biased. I'm all about the small colleges. My daughters went to small colleges. I went to a small college. And I represent small colleges. But those one-on-one opportunities with faculty members that you have here are what you're going to get in a small college. Above all, I urge you to keep your mind open. Where you begin this process is not where you're going to end it. Susan told me a great story tonight where you asked, tell me again the story about, you asked parents if they went to the college that they thought that they were going to end up at. Okay, how many of you went to a college that you didn't expect to go to, parents? Yeah, and how many of you had a great experience, right? More, not to, okay, some regrets there. More important than where you go, I want to leave this message with you. It's more important than where you go is what you do once you get there. So our focus is always on, where you get in. That's not even part of the game. It's what you do once you get there. Some people ask about how can they tell what a good college is, because clearly you're going to invest 4 years of your time and money and you want to make a good decision. Some people say it's all about the rankings, the U.S. News & World Report. I said we're going to talk about that. And I want to say, really, U.S. News & World Report is really all about money. 70% of the factors that go into those rankings are related to financial factors. You can trace the endowments of institutions and the rankings, and they almost correlate one for one. So yes, money does matter, but does money translate into excellence in terms of your experience? Not necessarily. You can get a lousy education at a very highly ranked college if it doesn't match your needs. Albert Einstein probably said this best. He said, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So education is a weird animal. You can't really measure it like you measure a business, with the bottom line and the outcomes. But there are some numbers that do matter. And I'd like to bring those to your attention right now. Retention is one of those measures that does really matter. How many students who begin their freshman year come back their second year? That will tell you something about truth in advertising, right? How many of those students graduate in 4 years? This is a question that's very fair to ask a college and university. It is an indicator of quality. Now you have to contextualize it. If you go to a school that invites kind of free-spirited kids, a school like Hampshire or even Reed, where the students are think way outside the box, retention might not be as good a measurement of quality. So you always have to put it into context. Class size and student faculty ratio. If you learn best in a small environment, student-faculty ratio and class size is going to matter to you. However, if you are a more passive learner, and there's nothing wrong with that, if you prefer to sit and receive the information, class size and student-faculty ratio is not going to mean that much to you. Placement rates. With the spiraling cost of colleges, this is a very fair question to ask any school, and any school that is worth their weight in gold will be able to give you placement rates for students who graduate with degrees in biology or economics. What kinds of jobs do students get on their first year? What are they doing 10 years out? What kinds of graduate schools do they get into? These are very important things that can be counted and that you should ask about. There's also a survey out there that's not very well known, and I bet Joan and Susan have talked to you, or will talk to you about this. It's called the National Survey of Student Engagement. NSSE, or NSSE is its abbreviation. And what it does is it tries to measure what kinds of encounters students have with faculty members inside and outside the classroom, what kind of intellectual conversations they have with their classmates outside the classroom, the kinds of things that try to get at intellectual vitality. It doesn't compare college to college. What it does compare is freshman to senior year. What kind of growth happens with students at those institutions? And schools should have their NSSE data up on their website. So that's another quality indicator. So, but you can really only define a good college in terms of this, you'll hear this word over and over again. These couple of words I use interchangeably, fit and match. And what they really are trying to get at is a school that really serves who you are. Colleges are like people. They have different personalities. They have different strengths. And you have to figure out if those match your strengths. I'm going to tell you a little story from Kenyon, and this is a student who graduated in '08. He was accepted to a couple of Ivy League schools. He figured out which one was highest ranked, and he deposited there. The night before the deadline, he woke his mother up in the middle of the night, put his face right in her face, and said, "I've made a terrible mistake. I don't want to go there." And he listened to himself, and he came down to Kenyon the next day, and he had figured out that it was going to be much better for him to learn to be a big fish in a small pond rather than the other way around. He was from small town Ohio. The Ivies were going to be hard for him. And so he withdrew his deposit at the Ivy League and came to Kenyon, which is is a really hard thing to fight prestige and instead to think more about match or fit. It may not be the best college in the country according to the rankings and the ratings, but it might be the best college for you. There's a happy ending to the story. He did get into Yale, Harvard, and Stanford law schools. So it worked out for him. You know, he got the prestige he eventually sought, but he had a great undergraduate experience. So a college search is really about two things. It's about self-knowledge, how do you learn, and it's about college knowledge. So let's talk a little bit about students about self-knowledge. You want to ask yourself a series of questions, and I bet in your deciding class you'll get at some of this. In what setting do I learn best? Small or large classes? In a collaborative or a competitive environment? Do I learn best where I'm one of the smartest students in the class, or one where I am reaching to be as smart as the smartest students in the class? Do I like a school where there's a strong focus on athletics or on the creative arts? These are just the beginnings of some of the questions you might want to ask. And your college counselors are here to help you figure out what it is that's important to you and what colleges match that. Some of the other questions, when you visit colleges, you kind of have to be like an anthropologist. You have to try to understand what is the culture of the place. You know, do you want to be at a place where there's a lot of diversity of opinion, or do you want to be at a place where there's some unithink or some homogeneity? Do you like students who are edgier or students who are more conservative, politically and socially? I took my oldest daughter to a college I thought that she would love, and her conclusion: I'm not different enough to be here. Okay. This is a girl who had a bar in her ear and a tattoo I'd never seen, and yet she perceived herself as being too conservative to go to that institution. And you know, she perceived herself as a middle-of-the-road kid, and that's why I mean about anthropology. You want to sort of figure out where you fit, but also remember that it's okay to feel a little bit uncomfortable too. When a student comes into my office and says, I am so comfortable here, warning signs go off for me. Because I think a lot of college is about being uncomfortable, about stretching yourself. And you know, so you want to get a balance there. Make sure you're not choosing the safe thing, but the thing that will really help you become the best person you can be. Okay, now we're going to talk about students, this being your process. Who here likes theater? Okay, will you do me a little favor while I'm here? Brave soul that you are, what's your name?
Sarah.
Sarah, nice to meet you. Okay, I'm going to ask, this is what I learned from being a parent and a student going through this process, and I'm going to ask you to read my daughter's part, okay?
Okay.
This is from the book that we did. This is a series of essays by parents, for parents of college-going students. Okay, so I'm going to read where it's not italicized, and I'm going to ask you to read where it's italicized, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay. You look a little bit like her.
Oh.
Emma. Okay. This college search process is so front-loaded with expectations that even those of us who do this for a living approach it with some trepidation. I was a brand new college dean when my oldest daughter Emma began her college search. I was delighted when her best friend's mother volunteered to take the two of them to California to look at schools. Emma returned from that trip saying, "It's not really my kind of place. I'm not a warm weather person. I don't really like wearing shorts." Okay, so college choice was in part about the wardrobe. This I hadn't anticipated.
Let me explain my mom's reaction to admittedly simplistic response. That trip was never about school. It was about hanging out with my best friend and seeing California. I'm placating my mother by making her think that I was giving serious thought the looming college selection deadline was just an added bonus. Despite what my mom remembers, the trip did teach me what I did not want in my future school. Relaying these thoughts to my mother was, of course, done in cryptic teenage girl language. Anyone with teenagers knows what I'm talking about. Let me decipher. "It's not really my place" means going to a school where the student population is larger than my hometown is terrifying to me. "I'm not a warm weather person" actually means I don't think I'll be able to handle the temptations of the parties, concerts, football games, and the opportunities to study by the pool. "I don't like wearing shorts" was my mom-friendly way of letting her know that I would never do homework because I would always be at the beach. My report was summarized in 2 short sentences, intended to be blunt so that my mother could not argue with my reasoning.
Thank you, Sarah. Good job. So there will be a lot of teenage girls speak here, and it will be because they're processing and they're letting it sift through all the geological layers of their understanding what they want. And sometimes they just feel something about an institution that they won't be able to articulate right off the bat. One of the hardest things for me was taking my daughters to colleges and then waiting